lesbians are everywhere in sports, as we will see.
Just everywhere.
Because they're everywhere.
That needs to be the opening clip.
They're everywhere. Watch
everywhere.
Out. Y'all, welcome back to the Bias Cut podcast. Let's get into it.
Well, first, happy 100 subscribers.
Yes, happy 100 subscribers. Woo! Fireworks. Okay, let's start. Let's get serious, guys, even though this is not serious. This is not a serious topic.
Let's lock it.
Actually, it does get serious, but today's episode is going to be, it's going to be called Locker Room Talk, Does the Uniform Make the Jock? And the real question here is, why is the sporty kind of aesthetic typically linked to queerness in media mainly, but also kind of IRL? Why is there this kind of, through line of the jock also being gay? I don't know if y'all experience that in life or not, but that's kind of what I experienced in my own personal life. I was the jock. I've played every single sport under the sun.
This is more of a
personal experience. It was me.
It was me. I was the jock.
I'm excited to hear about this.
Okay, so before I kind of get into it, I just want to lay out the parameters of kind of this deep dive. First off, I'll pretty much just be talking about the US, simply because every country has its own unique relationship to physical activity, gender, and sexuality, and so lumping countries together would only kind of further perpetuate the idea that queer and trans experiences are a monolith. But because the sports arena is so international, simply because of the Olympics and international sporting events, I'll definitely be referencing moments of queerness and transness in sports in other countries when that person or event is explicitly queer or touches the realm of queerness and transness. Second, I'm primarily talking about queer women and trans people because, to be honest, this is where we see visible queerness the most. I'm definitely not implying that gay men aren't professional athletes. Obviously, heated rivalry exists, and there are tons of gay male athletes out there.
I love that you state that as if it's non-fiction.
That is such
heated
a
rivalry
thing to say.
exists.
Obviously, there are gay male athletes.
Well, yes. This is a blend of fantasy and fact, okay? But obviously, shows like that also do teach us that, we do need more narratives about gay men in sports, because it's totally a space ruled by toxic masculinity, and it's often why we don't really see a lot of queerness in the mortal realm. But the reason why I stick to women and trans people here is because sports have historically been spaces where they are allowed to express a difference in a semi-safe way, which you can kind of barely call it safe, but essentially sports are places where, because you're being physical, women are able to not be perceived as hyper feminine, and so are able to kind of play with gender and express queer desires. Sports, in many ways, are known to be queer spaces. This rule doesn't necessarily apply to trans women just because men's sports are so hyper-masculine. They're certainly not spaces where trans women can kind of express gender in a safe way. And I say that because, oftentimes in actual sports, trans men are forced to play in women's professional leagues, and trans women are forced to play in men's professional leagues. So I'm not saying that, obviously, we hope for a world where trans women can play in women's leagues and vice versa. But yeah, trans women are often not allowed to participate in women's sports, although this is kind of changing a little bit, as we'll see. So this isn't me intentionally leaving people out. I think more than anything, it just shows how complex the world of sports is, because we've created such rigid regulations around gender in this context. But there are queer and trans people everywhere in sports. I just want to look more specifically at the queer women and trans masc people because it's such a massive stereotype. It's probably a stereotype that like we all kind of like know to be true.
Oh yeah.
So part 1 is, have sports always been queer? So we're gonna kind of like go throughout history a little bit and look at like women's participation in sports. So in the late 1800s, we have sports opening up a new space for women to socialize. So really like biking, tennis, and swimming were kind of big arenas where women started participating. But they were informal and recreational in nature, and they emphasized the physical activity as being a healthy social event for upper classes. It really tended to be like upper class women. And it focused on correct posture, facial and bodily beauty, muscles, and health. So it was really just like for women to be like, to work on their beauty, I guess.
Aesthetic value.
Yeah, aesthetic, exactly. Few women actually participated in these activities because they were really like subject to disapproval. Even though it kind of like existed in the upper classes, it was kind of like transgressive in its own way. Then in the early 1900s, we have some women's professional sports leagues starting to kind of be founded. So in 1916, there's the Amateur Athletic Union. They held its first national championship for women in swimming. So we're getting kind of like our first official sporting events where it's like you can win kind of like awards. And then in 1923, they also sponsored the first American track and field championship for women, which track and field specifically was like pretty big because it was seen as such like a masculine sport because you're really using like physical endurance. And that was kind of like the side of sports that like a lot of sports that existed for women were really kind of like playing a game rather than like using your physical ability to like,
you weren't supposed to push yourself, you weren't supposed to train like get stronger.
Yes. Yeah, you're not like actually sweating, you're just like playing a game.
Also the idea that like women wouldn't have endurance is crazy to me because I'm like, who is pushing out all of these babies?
Literally.
You know what kind of endurance you have to be able to do that?
They say that like giving birth once is like running akin to like running a marathon.
Yeah.
Like your body, and like that's in a matter of like, I mean, some, you know, births happen in like a couple hours. Others, like, you know, it takes longer, but like you're like
some take 48 hours.
Some take days.
But they're so strong.
No, seriously. I think it just like has to do with like how people were thinking about gender and sex at the time of like women being the like fairer kind of like more delicate, even though again literally giving birth. But okay, so then bicycling picked up in popularity and was seen to emancipate the woman more than anything else in the world, because, you know, like basically a lot of women like picked up cycling because they were able to kind of go places on their own. Like it was like your just like physical ability to do things on your own. But then there also were like biking races that are like so cool. And you just see like women riding around in their like little skirts and biking. So cool.
Editing, just popping in here to say, as you can see in this archival video from 1926, by the time we get to the 20s, the garment for women cycling had changed significantly, and uniforms specifically really change the game. So we see no more bifurcated skirts with cycling uniforms. We see these kind of like very short shorts. And then for average cycling that's outside of the arena, you see those bifurcated skirts. There's a lot of overlap with all of this, but just if you're confused, that's kind of, there is a difference between uniforms and what people were wearing playing these activities for leisure.
And they had to get new skirts, right, to be able to have the movement of biking. And it was obviously, I don't know a lot about this. From what I do understand, it was pretty frowned upon, but like still somewhat socially acceptable because there was a reason for it, you know?
Exactly.
So, like,
So question, when did like bifurcated clothing come in? Because that, it was for cycling, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it was like literally for cycling. So it's happening around this time. It's kind of like, because like cycling was starting to pop up as like this like casual activity for women to do in the late 1800s, but it wasn't like a sporting event. And so you see it kind of like slowly bifurcated skirts, and then like the plus fours coming in around that
which
time.
we talked about in the Zoot Suit episode.
Exactly.
check it out.
Link to that. But I'll definitely get into that a little bit more in the next section. But yeah, we're really seeing this changing how women are dressing. And then the Olympics actually started allowing women to compete from 1900 onward. So this started with tennis, sailing, croquet, equestrian, and golf, which all of those sports, I don't know about y'all, but those are sports that I really associate with the upper class. Like even today, I associate those as like rich people sports, because they're often behind, like tennis courts are often in country clubs, at least in the US, although that's obviously changing a bit. And then sailing, like that, you have to have a boat. Equestrian, horses are expensive. Golf courses, like really like upper class kind of
versus like
situation.
a football, all you need is a football
exactly
to be able to
exactly
play. Yeah.
Do you guys not have local tennis courts?
We do
here.
Okay.
We do, but like historically, it's been they've been behind.
For sure.
But we
you
like
just scared me when you said tennis courts are only in country clubs. I was like, huh?
They slowly started to open up sports that required more physical exertion. So that was swimming, running, rugby, soccer, etc. Kind of more physically demanding sports, because concern over the physical strength and stamina of women led to kind of the discouragement of women participation in more physically strenuous sports. So it was kind of this like slow integration into these sports that are like considered masculine. Although women started to gain admittance to the Olympics, the general response towards women playing sports was mixed and often not seen as positive. Society, mainly men, saw women who played sports as either too masculine or too sexual. Because sports changed how women dressed, which we'll get into in a bit, there were certain activities that were seen as more respectable than others. So tennis, croquet, and golf were more respectful than boxing, which was seen as a pornographic exhibition. And women who participated were likened to music hall artists and objects of fantasy. Or they were too masculine, dressing too similarly to their male counterparts. So we see like it's the Madonna whore complex of like, but it's in this case it's like negative on both ends. It's like you're too masculine or you're way too sexual for doing boxing in particular, and I'll get into that in a bit too.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to talk about it more, I was just wondering, is that due to the physicality of the sport or what they were wearing? Well, I guess both, right?
Kind of both. Yeah. And I'll get into it in a bit because boxing is like so fascinating to me. But I think it also had to do with like the performance aspect of boxing. Like it is a very like showy, flashy sport. So yeah, I'll put a little bit of a pin in that. So then the 1930s to 70s, that's obviously we're kind of jumping forward in a big way, but you basically just see kind of like a slow progression towards women in more sports, largely due to their place in society. So women are entering the workforce because of World War II, and they're needing to pick up jobs left behind by enlisted men. So they're enjoying new freedoms, and part of that was like they're really getting into sports in this period. And then because women are way too active, 1970s, we see Title IX kind of really changing the game for women athletes. So in 1972, Title IX ensured that no person shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participating in, be denied benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. Basically, Title IX prohibited discrimination based on sex in schools that received federal funding and initially had nothing to do with sports. The Education Act of 1975, however, required that both male and female athletes have equal facilities and equal benefits, such as equipment, uniform, supplies, training, practice, yada, yada, yada. So the Education Act really like changed things for women athletes. Also, there's going to be a lot of like talking about sex, female, male. Like these are words that like I don't particularly like prescribed. I don't like kind of this very like biological way of talking about gender, but because this is like such a integral point or part of like how we like police sports. It's the language,
especially
that
historically use. Like yeah
exactly,
you can't ignore it.
Exactly So Title IX is like massive for women in sports. And so basically from the 80s to the present, we have this like rapid integration of women in sports. However, professional athletes in the US since the early 1900s, paid teams, leagues, and then, singular athletes. It's very uncommon for them to be paid well at all, and it's also incredibly hard for them to like get into the industry in a big way, and so that continues to be a problem. But I think in recent years there's been kind of this like big trajectory upwards of like people being interested in women's leagues. Okay, so now we're gonna look at sports and gender nonconformity. So where does like queerness and transness kind of like exist in all of this?
Can I just say before you start that?
Oh yeah.
The basketball uniform in the 1950s, that's so freaking cute.
Right?
Maggie, like you need to get this.
Which one is it? The little
the
shorts?
Basketball in the 1950s. Yeah, the one with the really tall
one
girl and the short one.
See, I like the one on the right too.
So gay.
But like the little sleeves are so cute.
Right?
I know.
It's like sailor collar kind of thing.
It's so cute.
That is adorable.
Anyway, sorry.
I need to go on eBay and try and find it.
Okay. So this is the section, sports and gender nonconformity, that we're going to be, it's going to get a little bit heavy because we're going to be talking about, unfortunately, like sex testing, which happens a lot in the Olympics and still happens. So kind of like a content warning, this is going to get like not super fun. But then we'll turn it around and everything will be magical and gay and happy again.
Should we do like a skip to this if you don't want the heavy?
Yeah, skip
like,
to this.
Yeah, skip ahead to fun stuff again.
Skip ahead.
It will just be a rainbow like transition page.
Yeah, so looking at the slow progression of women's acceptance into sports, Why is there this crossover between queerness and transness in sports? Why is this, in many ways, like a pretty common stereotype? I think it's because it is seen as so controversial for women to participate in any form of physical activity. These were spaces where women who were okay challenging what was deemed socially acceptable could find like-minded people. It's possible even that the idea of this activity being mannish or unwomanly was part of the appeal. It was a way to live a lifestyle that was in some respects socially queer and transgressive. So it was the perfect environment for queer women and trans people to be together. Male-dominated sports created a space for subversive forms of femininity, such as lesbianism, that detach from traditional gender roles. Marginalized groups typically band together to create a collective strength and find support networks to work against the systemic disadvantages they face. Given this, it only makes sense for queer people to flock together in an athletic setting. And when you add the possibility of queer romantic attraction and friendship connections, the correlation between women's athletic space and queer visibility becomes clear. Because of this, we have some early queer and trans sports icons that I'd like to talk about. So it's going to be fun for a second and then it'll get sad. It's a roller coaster of emotions. So the first person we have is Violet Morris, who was a athlete in the 20s and 30s. They were Palestinian and French, and a multidisciplinary athlete who competed in boxing, race car driving, tennis, swimming, football, weightlifting, Greco-Roman wrestling, and other sports.
Hell yeah.
They literally did it all. Morris is an interesting figure because they got their breasts removed so they could be a better race car driver. So it was kind of like an early top surgery.
Purely aerodynamics.
No, literally, like I gotta get these joints off.
I love that so much.
That's why trans people do it. It's just for aerodynamics, guys.
I just want to go fast.
I just want to go fast. Y'all better watch out. I'm gonna be so quick once I get my boobs removed.
I'm gonna be speeding back.
I think that there were I think the reason why people say like it was because they could perform better as a race car driver. Like, I think they mentioned, I'm sure because it was so controversial, I'm pretty sure they, like, mentioned to the press, they were like, well, I just did it so I could be a better race car driver.
That's what I assume. It's like, people would be talking about it, so they had to be like, well, I did it.
Yeah, so I'm also referring to Morris with, like, they, them pronouns, because the way that they expressed gender was like seemingly very fluid, and I think using other pronouns, I just don't know like what Violet would have used at the time, but they were trending towards trans in my opinion, and so so I'm gonna be just using they them pronouns.
Also, I would preface saying that we laughed about it, but probably the reason they said that they decided to get top surgery, like they probably came up with I don't know. I feel like it would have been something that they maybe couldn't articulate fully why they would have wanted to make that decision.
Exactly.
Maybe it was. I mean,
really, to be honest, if you want to just go fast, so valid.
No, but
it was
like
purely a technical decision.
Yeah.
Also,
but the thing is like
here for that.
100%. But also like, I don't think other athletes were doing this at the time. Like, it's just like,
maybe
and
Violet
the
was
nature,
just a revolutionary.
Yeah,
Violet was more committed than anyone.
The nature of like those surgeries too was like,
it's so dangerous.
Like you're going to like sexologists who like were working with trans people, like known trans people. So I think I don't think it's that much of a stretch to be like, we'll just use they them pronouns,
just
because
disclaimer to be safe of like, we don't know,
Yeah, we don't. Okay, yeah. So they got top surgery, and this was kind of like a big thing at the time, because this was kind of like a field of medicine that was really developing. It was mainly developing in Berlin with Magnus Hirschfeld, who's a pretty well-known sexologist, and he worked at the Institute for Sexual Research, which was a pretty big place that was doing gender-affirming care at the time. This was kind of like a growing field. It was kind of a new thing.
There's a really good documentary about that. It's just about Berlin specifically, because obviously you have the rise of the Nazis at the same time that you have this burgeoning field of study, and it gets into you know, the intricacies of that.
But yeah, I mean, Berlin was kind of like the Institute for Sexual Research is so well known. It's like the place where like the most, I guess, progressive, even though like the people who were doing the research and care weren't necessarily the most progressive minded people, they were doing some of the most progressive kind of care for trans people. So the next person is Zdeněk Koubek, who is a Czechoslovakian athlete who was also competing in the 30s. And he won 2 medals at the 1934 Women's World Games, and several national titles. And it's pretty much, so he was a track athlete, and he kind of just like picked it up out of the blue. Like one day he went to a track competition and was like, that's sick, and then just became this like really insane
then
track
he just
athlete.
ran really fast.
No, literally. As trans people are kind of wont to do. I gotta go.
New stereotypes. Trans people are really fast.
They're always running.
Better watch out.
Just
especially with our top surgeries. I mean, shit. Koubek was born intersex. He was raised as a girl and later came out as a man when he retired from athletics in 1935. He had gender-affirming surgery and is considered one of the earliest recorded gender transitions in athletics specifically, at the international level. And just to be clear, I'm choosing to talk about Koubek, other intersex athletes like him here, because he came out as a man and transitioned from having been assigned woman at birth. Though he was intersex, he expressed a desire to be a different gender than the one thrust upon him at birth. However, I do want to note that intersex identity is complex, and not everyone who identifies as intersex is also trans or queer. These are totally separate things. Intersex refers to people who are born with a variety of differences in their sex traits and reproductive anatomy. There is a wide variety of differences among intersex variations, and more often than not, internationally, people who are born intersex will undergo invasive procedures as babies and children to correct their gender, and heavy quotes on correct. I'll leave some readings kind of below if you want to learn more about that, but I'm just going to be referring to people who intentionally transitioned so as to not assume anything about people. But yeah, so Koubek was like kind of this crazy cool athlete, and his case was like very well known internationally. It kind of like the newspapers picked it up because he was such a well-known athlete, and he actually ended up going to America a few times to like perform in variety shows as like a sports guy. Which is really fun. Like he like did like his little he did like his guy. He did like a little like sports routine. I don't know what it was. No one's clear about what he did. It's just like he did a sports routine.
He just ran really far.
Topless.
People coming to watch.
I would have seen it.
It was a different time. A show came into town.
It's a different time
to see it.
Mm-hmm. But he has this like really incredible quote because he kind of started doing these like variety shows. A newspaper interviewed him, and he said, "Do not look upon me as a person who wants to be shown for effect at the entrance to a zoo. Not that. Look at me as a citizen who, after a brief, unpleasant delay, wants to get on the right track and ultimately reach the intended destination via a peaceful path of progress." Which I think is really cool because he was kind of, in some ways, like thrust into this world of like theatrics when he was just like, he was a runner. He wanted to be doing sports, doing his sports thing. He was just a track star.
I'm sorry.
A track star.
This is supposed to be the serious part of the episode. It's pretty silly to me.
Seemingly not serious at all.
Sorry.
But yeah, so he says this because he was kind of like thrust into the world of like performance and just wanted to like, you know, be in sports. Like he wanted to be a track star. So the next person that we have is Mark Edward Lewis Weston.
Is he English?
That's crazy. Yeah, he's English. So he's performing, or he's competing at a similar time as Kovac. He's a British field athlete and he participated in women's competitions. In the 1920s, he did javelin throw and discus, as well as shot put. So kind of all of like the big throwing parts of track and field. He was throwing shit around. He was the Peter Millark of sports.
I was just thinking about Peter Millark. Yeah. When they were like, just throw that.
Just like, throw a sack of flour, guys.
And I was that clip. He just throws it, and all the careers are like, look at you just threw that.
So, similar to Kovac, Weston was born intersex and raised as a girl, but in 1936, he underwent a series of corrective surgeries. So the two of them don't participate in the 1936 Olympics because of all of this, and because they, like, their cases like blew up internationally. The next person we have is Lillian Parr, who was also an athlete at a similar time. This is all kind of like the 20s, 30s, 40s vibe. She was an English football player. She played for Dick Keir's ladies team, which was founded in 1917. She was a relatively out lesbian. She lived with her partner Mary and was just a football player. And football as in the British soccer. So for any, if that, that's the I was like, should I call it soccer, football? Like
the issue with having a British person and on the screen,
and,
like you have to address it.
Our audience is pretty mixed too, so
it is
clarification, yes.
And then the last person that we have is Babe Didrikson Zaharis, who was an American athlete. She excelled in golf, basketball, baseball, track and field. She like also kind of did every sport under the sun, which is kind of a common thread in these kind of like earlier women trans athletes. Like they're kind of like doing everything, which is super cool. She won 2 gold medals and a silver in track and field at the 1932 Summer Olympics. Though she was married to a man, she divorced him and had a romantic relationship with the fellow golfer Betty Dodd towards the end of her life.
Hell yeah. Babe's a babe. I love her.
She's a total babe. Okay, so this is where the darkness sets in, guys. Testing for athletes. The American Olympic Committee president, Avery Brundage, grew concerned about athletes he called quote-unquote hermaphrodites, that term is like entirely transphobic. Even when it was used in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was a lot of stigma attached to the word, and it was often used to refer to people who were socially cast out of society, like circus and theater performers. And today, these oftentimes refer to intersex people, but it was kind of just like thrown around to anyone who was like doing anything different or like perceived to be doing anything different with gender, which like, yeah, that's even like a gray area. So he was concerned about like these people entering the entering Olympic sports, and urged the International Olympic Committee to require a medical examination before participation in the Olympic Games. And this was a rule that basically allowed for medical examinations of athletes whose sex was called into question, and was passed before the 1936 Berlin Olympics. So sex testing really starts with this Olympic Games. And also, as much as it was Avery Brundage and his kind of like committee of people. It was in a massive way because of the Nazi Party and their kind of like eugenics-y campaign. And basically kind of like a growing fear of men dressed as women participating in women's events. So Kobach, as I've said, came out in 1935, and that kind of sparked an outrage in Eastern Europe as well as internationally. It was like an outrage, but it was also kind of like, it was positive in some ways. Like, people were very curious by it, and I think it was obviously very affirming for trans people who were seeing that. And then shortly after, Weston came out as a trans guy, which also sparked kind of like more international outrage. So these two athletes, like, people are concerned that, like, you know, the trans people are out to get them for whatever reason.
Because they're just so damn fast.
They're so damn fast. And way too sexy, guys.
When you said it could, so anyone whose gender was called into question, so anyone could just go, hey, I think that person is a boy, or
literally,
like, and then they would have to get tested.
It was all aesthetic based, and we'll see this like even today. It's all aesthetic based. Like, it really had nothing to do with, like... It happened
recently, didn't it?
Yes, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah. And also, if someone simply was a good athlete, like,
I was gonna
literally,
say,
if someone was running too fast, they were like, that's a guy, actually. So, because of Kobach and Weston, I'm going to get into, like, athletes who aren't trans or queer, because this kind of has, like, this trickle-down effect. So athletes like the American track and field runner Helen Steffens, as well as Polish-American track and field athlete Stanisława Wałaszewicz, were speculated to be men.
Is she running with a hat? Because that's so funny.
Yeah.
So
there's
cute.
A lot of weird stuff that happened with, or like fun stuff that happened with women's uniforms. Steffens received scrutiny over her gender after her 100-meter victory, with newspapers suggesting it is scandalous that the Americans entered a man in the women's competition, and journalists reporting on her alleged lack of femininity. And a similar thing happened to Wałaszewicz. So even after the International Olympic Committee confirmed both athletes' sex tests, confirmed that they were women, Avery Brundage basically just denied this. He was like, that's not true.
So they still weren't allowed to compete?
They did compete because, like, technically, because, like, the International Committee was like, no, like, the sex tests proved that they were like women. So what's different between these two athletes is that Wałaszewicz was born intersex, but had been assigned a woman at birth and was happily living her life as such. She made no indication that, like, you know, she experienced life as anything different. Steffens had endured an injury during childhood that made her voice lower, and she was also just naturally muscly, and so people suspected that she was a man. So both of these people, like, with Wałaszewicz, like, she was intersex, but that also, like, meant, that could mean so many things. And then with Steffens, she basically just had, like, a lower voice because of an injury. So it's like, it meant nothing.
Yeah.
So how has this fear manifested today? The difference between the experiences of older athletes and those presently is that in the past, these women were subjected to visual inspection and then later chromosomal testing. Today's women's athletes are subjected to a confused search for hormonal masculinity. So the actual sex tests are different. But that visual inspection persists in a big way.
Seriously?
In a massive way.
That's crazy.
I mean, that's essentially what gets people, like, I mean, I think every woman athlete has to do this sex testing before participating in the Olympic Games, but a lot of this is simply, like, aesthetic visual.
And do you know, like, what is the testing that they do? Like,
how invasive is that?
Very invasive. I haven't looked into, like, the, like, nitty-gritty of it because I'm honestly scared of it.
Yeah.
But it's essentially like testing hormone levels. So it's like testing testosterone, which I'll get into in a bit, but, like, testosterone doesn't do anything for your performance at all. But yeah, essentially it's just testosterone levels, and then they also still do the chromosomal testing as well. So the first person presently that we'll be talking about is Maria Mutola, who's a Mozambican track and field runner. She's one of the greatest 800-meter runners to have ever competed. She has 3 world championships and Olympic gold medals, and she was subject to endless rumors, examinations, tests by Olympic officials. They never found whatever the hell they were looking for because it was total bullshit. But she retired before the testosterone, like hormonal tests were established. And also a lot of this, and we'll get into in a second, a lot of this just comes down to misogynoir. Like, it's oftentimes Black athletes or just darker skinned athletes, period, who are the subject of these like false rumors. The next person, and I think this is probably one of the most well-known cases, is Caster Semenya, who's a South African Olympic runner, and Mutola is actually her coach. So her, again, quote unquote, sex was in question before she crossed the finish line in 2009. Her case became the biggest story in women's sports that year. When she powered past her opponents, it looked as if she were built of different stuff, as it does in a race that's not close. So basically, she was just like far ahead of people, and so they speculated, well, something has to be going on here. She was accused by many of being a man, of being not 100% woman. She was diagnosed in headlines as a hermaphrodite, so we're seeing that word come back again, which is just disgusting. She was also diagnosed as being intersex, as a gender freak. She was subjected to diverse tests, the invasive nature of which we can only imagine was just horrific. Her case, that of perceived gender non-conforming woman who is also one of the fastest women on earth, inspired international bodies governing a range of sports to adopt problematic policies for deciding just what exactly a woman athlete looks like. This case, the question, the problem of Semenya is just one instance of ritual humiliation of women and queer people that defines the sport spectacle. Women are pathologized as excessive in their physicality and temperament. Women are regulated out of competition for their gender variance. Lesbians, visible everywhere in women's sports as athletes and fans, are ignored with an astonishing aggression. As a Black woman, she runs like the man she is not. She runs out of gender. She does not make sense. How can this athlete, who is faster than every other woman, really be a woman? It's not who she is, it's what she is. So she's basically just made to be a spectacle. She became this like poster for like all of these gross accusations about women athletes. And again, similar to Mutola, she's just an athlete. Like, she's just an exceptional athlete. Oftentimes, higher levels of testosterone happen with athletes naturally because they're training. They're like they're physically active. It's gonna happen in anyone, but it literally means nothing. So the next case,
you should just say that like for like any woman, women have testosterone anyway. Just for anyone who doesn't know that. Literally. And also, your testosterone levels will vary across your cycle. Mm-hmm. That's just something that happens to everyone. Mm-hmm. I just want to put, because I know,
and some women just have like higher or like use like the sex term, like female, like the higher.
Yeah, or, sorry, I didn't know.
But higher or lower, just throughout your cycle. 100%. Yeah, and then just it varies for everyone.
So even when athletes come out as trans, they are typically either forced to continue playing as the gender they do not identify with or quit the sport entirely. So 2 cases of this are Kai alums, who's an NCAA basketball player who came out as trans but decided to remain on the women's basketball team for a short period of time. I don't think he's currently playing, but that's one case of that. There's also Harrison Brown, who's a professional ice hockey player who was in Heated Rivalry.
He has a documentary, doesn't he?
I think so, yeah.
I've been meaning to watch it.
Yeah. So he left the league after coming out as trans. I think he played for a little bit, but he doesn't play anymore. So essentially just like, you're either forced into a category that you like decidedly don't want to be in, or you just quit the sport entirely. So at the core of sex testing and this fear of masculine women is transphobia that is specifically rooted in the fear of trans women. Trans men, more than anything, are not allowed to participate in men's sports because quote unquote women are seen as weaker, and so they're not considered to be competition. The skepticism of women being too masculine is an insidious and false fear of trans women, categorically. To wrap this bit up, the reason why I've really focused on queer women and trans masc people is because of the controversy surrounding women or people assumed to be women and their involvement in sports. This has essentially created the perfect space for queer people to be in community together, but it has also restricted people who want to participate in men's sports and trans women from participating in women's sports. The world of sports has traditionally served as a domain dominated by the masculine and subsequently has been treated as a site to maintain that masculinity. Organized sports are filled with rules and practices that emphasize maintaining certain acceptable forms of masculinity and the status quo. This holds especially true for sports like ice hockey and American football, where the performance of masculinity is almost sacred. Homophobic and misogynistic slurs are used quite casually and frequently, and only recently are players being fined and called out for such behavior. The reason I bring up language is because it's indicative of the underlying belief that to be perceived as either feminine or queer is an insult, especially in highly masculine spaces. Queerness is seen as transgressive and as a threat to the dominant culture of sports and society at large. But what happens with women's sports when this out-of-place masculinity is pre-assumed? I also want to mention here there are some iconic trans women athletes because they've played a massive part in trans rights in sports. Laurel Hubbard is a New Zealand weightlifter who plays within her gender category. Renee Richards is an American tennis player who paved the way for trans women in sports when she fought to compete as a woman in the 1976 US Open. The US Tennis Association began requiring genetic screening for women players that year, but the New York Supreme Court ruled in her favor, which was a landmark case in trans rights. Super, super cool. We also have more IRL trans and queer people in sports. Lesbians are everywhere in sports. As we will see.
Everywhere.
Because they're everywhere.
That needs to be the opening clip.
They're everywhere. Watch out. Women athletes are commonly stereotyped to be LGBTQ, generally. Ava Kindop, who formerly played for the UCLA women's rugby, said that people just assumed that she was gay just because she plays rugby. She said, "The majority of my team are out or openly lesbian, gay, or queer." You also have rugby players like Ilana Mayer, who everyone thought was gay, but had to come out as straight to her fan base. Unfortunately, many people still speculate about her queerness, which is pretty frustrating, especially because sports are considered to be masculine, and she has talked about, like her femininity and how that has also just affected her. So there's kind of like a give and take with it. Women's sports like soccer, basketball, softball, and rugby are notorious for having high numbers of queer players.
Notorious.
Warning. The 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup was a historic moment for queer representation. Over 13% of the athletes competing in the tournament were openly queer. Yay! Wow! We have also the iconic married couple, the original Heated Rivalry girlies, hockey players, Julie Chu and Carolyn Ouellette.
So much.
They're literally sick. They have a kid together. They are hockey players. They're cool. So that kind of concludes that section. Now we're going to get into, does clothing make the jock? What's so gay about sportswear? So how did athletic clothing become an accessible and appropriate way for queer women and trans people to explore identity? As I've already briefly touched on, athletic clothing was really what changed modern women's wear and women's ability to wear trousers. In the 1910s and 20s, women began playing sports in a much bigger way, and we needed dress to accommodate for this. So biking required looser skirts, so we have the bifurcated skirts and blue fours, really drastically changed women's wear in a big way. In tennis, although a lot of players wore skirts, so many of them wore trousers. And then boxing uniforms, a hugely controversial sport for women to participate in. Many wealthy women would hire professional male boxers to train them, but it was done privately and was really just for physical health and not for show. But we do have people like Violet Morris, who was an out and proud boxer, lesbian, possibly trans person. And Morris was super controversial because they would wear entire suits. So they would wear trousers and jackets, garments that were highly controversial for someone socialized as a woman to wear at the time. And they wore this ensemble so often that the Fédération Féminine Sportive de France refused to renew their license amid complaints about their lifestyle.
When they were boxing?
Not the suits. But they
I thought they were boxing in a suit.
Honestly, they may have. But no, the actual uniforms, the actual uniforms that they wore were very similar to the uniforms that male boxers wore. Yeah. And so it was really, really controversial for women to outwardly participate in this sport. Like basically wealthy women would do it as like a way to get fit, and participating, you know, on the stage was super controversial because they were very revealing. And so it warranted this idea that you're way too sexual or you're way too manly. And then off stage, they would just wear these suits, and they drove also. They would do their like race car driving in these little suits. Yeah. And they would also just kind of like wear that around town too.
So they were policed for what they were wearing outside of the sport?
Yeah. Got it. 100%. Yeah. So then for baseball and softball, also tended to be skirts, but many women would also wear pants while playing. Baseball is definitely more on the controversial side because it was a more physical sport. So essentially what you have are socially acceptable places where women or trans people are allowed to put on menswear. So this naturally created an environment of people who intentionally participated in sports to wear transgressive clothing. Many athletes would also wear their activewear outside of the context, further cementing this idea of activewear being tied to queerness and transness. As we left the 1920s and 30s, women began to slowly wear trousers outside of sports. Because of World War II, people are, you know, doing their thing, and sports continue to be... People are doing their war thing. As such, women's uniforms started to look more and more like men's uniforms. There were still and still are slight differences, but by and large, they're really trending to be similar. Alongside all of the controversy behind biological differences between men and women, women's sports have remained spaces where queer women and trans people congregate. Sports attire is seen in pop culture as queer-coded. So do we still see this today? Unfeminine sports provided queer athletes with benefits and positive experiences they may not have ever found otherwise. Across the board, sports are a homosocial environment, providing recreation for those who prefer to spend time with peers of the same gender. And many of these people are also part of the queer community. Participation in such masculine sports can provide against homophobia for those queer women who may lie on the masculine side of the spectrum but are not out. Rather than having to hide their masculinity, they can rationalize it by stating that they participate in a sport and are not gay. As that is a stereotype, but not every woman athlete is gay. So it's kind of a way to like, for a lot of queer women to like dabble in the dark arts. And like wear uniforms that are like very genderless and not necessarily be out to society or out to their like loved ones. So why has athletic clothing remained accessible and affirming clothing for lesbians and trans people? Athletic clothing has always had this kind of genderless aspect to it. Even when we're looking at 1910s and 20s, the uniforms women and trans people wore at the time, though to us may be seen as more feminine, was culturally seen as too masculine. And this only persisted as women's and men's uniforms grew closer in similarity. This clothing has always been the safe way for queer women and trans people to perform a different form of femininity or perform masculinity entirely. When we compare this to other clothing trends for women, we don't often see this genderless aspect all that frequently. We certainly have moments of this kind of crossover. Like I think of like suits in the 80s for women. They definitely kind of mimicked men's suits. So,
power dressing.
Yeah, power dressing, exactly. But the through line has really been athletic wear. It's kind of trended towards genderless throughout. So for masc, lesbians, and trans masc people, sportswear is often your first introduction to gender play in clothing. Sports bras are often the first binders trans people wear. Basketball shorts hide your hips, and baggy t-shirts allow for a masculine look in the chest. So it's really like just the introduction to playing with your gender and expressing something different. I know for myself, I was like big into athletic wear in high school as, I was figuring out my gender. And it was really a way for me to kind of like hide the parts of my body I didn't like. And feel like I was almost something different. I wasn't dressing in a super feminine way. So it really is just like an accessible way to play with your gender because again, sportswear is often really inexpensive. And so and you sometimes are given your uniform by your team for free. So it's a way to kind of feel that affirming aspect to it. So that's kind of like athletic clothing. It has a lot of these like queer undertones, but it really just, it's an accessible way to perform a different type of gender and sexuality and also be in community together. So next we're going to get into queer jocks in the media.
Woo!
So queer sports in movies and TV, it's everywhere. Typically, when we think of queer sporty characters, we have two options. Either we're looking at newer releases of movies and TV, such as Heated Rivalry, Love Lies Bleeding, Heartbreak High, or Pretty Little Liars, where the characters are canonically queer and they're more or less accepted within their societies, or a character's sexuality is not a part of the plot, but most queer people agree that they're gay. So examples of this would be Stick It and Bend It Like Beckham. The inclusion of queerness in fictional sports teams with players falling in love with each other or side characters takes what we already love about the subgenre to the next level. The characters are often popular, which adds glamour to the premise of the romantic relationship. So for movies, we have Love Lies Bleeding, which came out in 2024. We have Lou. So Lou is a gym manager who falls for Jackie, who's an ambitious bodybuilder. It's not a romance movie per se, it's more of a thriller, but the whole premise of the movie is Lou basically lusting after this like big bodybuilder. And so many of the scenes that we're seeing that we saw in the movie are moments when Jackie is in the gym working out and is wearing, tank tops that show her muscles and short sports shorts that show her, big thighs. And Lou is like lusting after that. So clothing becomes a part of the desire in the movies. Like sports attire becomes desirable. Then we have Signature Move, from 2017, which is about two lesbian wrestlers in Chicago. And again, their performance wear becomes a part of their desire. So there are scenes of the two characters kissing in the wrestling matches or masks. And so that kind of becomes a part of their romance and their desire for each other. We have Beautiful Boxer from 2003, which is a biographical movie based on the life of Perinya Charopo, who's a famous Gatoi Muay Thai fighter, actress, and model. And the whole premise of this is that she uses boxing as a way to save up money to afford her gender-affirming care, which is super cool. She performs in the boxing ring with makeup and becomes a part of her performance. Like, she'll put makeup on before her, like on the in the boxing ring. So it really becomes this like really interesting way to subvert kind of the toxic masculinity of the boxing arena. And then there's National Anthem from 2024, which is a queer rodeo. And it's basically just gay people on a ranch falling in love.
Gay people on horses. Woo!
Woo! And listen, it's the Brokeback redemption that we needed. And then Stick It. Stick It, okay. Stick It is very important to me.
Stick it.
Stick it.
No follow-up.
Just stick it. Movie from 2006 about this gymnast who basically is like fallen out of the sport and is doing dirtbag things. She's running around with her friends who are these two little gay boys. I think they're gay boys. They're riding on bikes. They're like they have this kind of like skater aesthetic that I literally love.
Beating the gays want to be fast allegation.
literally. And this time it's 3 gays. So in the movie, like, the main character, Haley, she's not canonically queer, but, like, you can't tell me that's not a lesbian. And she basically, like, she has this very, like, tomboy type aesthetic throughout. And really, like, rubs up against the idea of, like, wearing this, like, very feminine uniform, and prefers to wear these, like, very masculine, like, skater boy type silhouettes that are still very sporty. So it's not that she's, like, trying to dress masculine, period. She's trying to dress as, like, masculine, sporty vibes. So to get into the cheerleading lesbians, But I'm a Cheerleader, from 1999, cult classic. Essentially what you have is this girly gets told by her parents that she's gay and she has to go to conversion Christian
Not just
camp.
her parents, everyone around her just goes,
you're gay.
And she's like, what are you talking about?
She's like, what? And then she gets into the boot camp and she's like, wait, I'm so gay. So a lot of like femme lesbians have like taken that over. Love that. I think it's super cool. So moving into TV, we have Glee with Santana and Brittany being lesbian icons. Again, I feel like this is kind of the most overt place where we see this like fetishy kind of like male gaze onto Santana and Brittany. However, I think if you like look at it truly, those characters played the parts so well, and I think
100%.
they did those characters such justice, where it's like, I think the original intention was meant to be kind of like fetishy, but I think it's been
They both play it so sincerely.
They played it so well.
And it's genuinely like...
It's so genuine. And then Pretty Little Liars, Emily and Paige, guys. Big...
Lest we forget.
Big lesbian swimmers. I think specifically with this, what's interesting is that Pretty Little Liars, the way that they like costumed that whole show was to like create tropes. Oh yeah, that'll be another video.
Yeah.
But they created like tropes of like the preppy, the designer girl, the like nerdy girl, and then Emily was literally just the lesbian jock. Okay, so then we have Heartbreak High, which the new season just came out.
I've already watched it.
Same with me. And Missy is the bisexual jock. I think, again, what's interesting about this is that I think the show, because they have so many characters that you're following the storylines, I think the costuming, they tried to like basically make it very personality based, which I think can come across sometimes as a little bit poppy and like overdone in some regards, but I think it's a way to show characters' personalities without getting too far into their storylines. And Missy is just the bisexual jock. She's obviously more than that, but and then finally we have A League of Their Own, which is just lesbian softball players being lesbian softball players.
Yeah. Again, I was like, where's A League of Their Own? How did they miss that?
Yeah. League of Their Own. And then so many books that we don't even really need to get into, but so many books are sports jocks, lesbians, trans people, you know, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, essentially just like you see a lot of this trope in the media. It's kind of everywhere. It's everywhere when you're looking for it. So to kind of like conclude this, and then I have a couple questions for you guys. The fact that we see this trope so often in the media, that it's essentially become a stereotype, reveals a truth about sportswear and queerness/transness. Although this stereotype can be harmful, we see more often than not the sporty character in a TV show or book being queer or trans. Not to mention the media that's about this very specifically. This reflects the state of women's sports, where so many players are out as queer or trans. Sports remain spaces where queer women and trans masc people can explore identity and sexuality because the clothing is genderless, often baggy, and allows for a different expression of gender. So my question to y'all is, what's the difference between an athletic uniform and athletic clothing? Could athletic clothing be more of an expression of sexuality and gender because it's more of a choice? Like, you can take the super like hyper feminine route of activewear. But then there's also so much of activewear that is loose that like people, a lot of people
Zendaya
wear as well.
Zendaya talks about she always used to wear basketball shorts under all of her like, fancy dresses and stuff. So I think comfort is a massive part of it. Like I think that just physical comfort is a huge part.
Yeah.
And I do think, like you were saying, you were talking about how it's become like sports clothing is probably one of the least gendered clothing like that we have, and I think a lot of that relates to access to comfort in the like a lot rather than an expression of identity is more just like, I'm gonna wear my basketball shorts because
it's comfy.
I don't know if it's reached a point where it's become so democratized that it's like not as big of an identity signifier for mainstream public, like because anyone could wear like basketball shorts and an oversized jersey out and no one would really question anything. I think it does depend like the context it's being worn. And yeah, I mean, we were talking about this with like just in when it comes to queer coded clothing, have we reached a point where those codes don't signify anything anymore because they've been adopted by like beyond queer communities? Because obviously they were there to like be a safe way to signify to someone else that you're queer, but now everyone kind of wears it, so it kind of loses. I don't know, it's a tricky, like the whole thing, carabiners, jorts,
that's something that just does like naturally happen over time. And like clothing does have meaning, but the meaning changes as culture changes. But yeah, like those symbols, like the carabiner and stuff, like they're still important. It's tricky.
I think clothing meant something completely different in the, the 20s and 30s when people are participating in these sports for the first time, and like it was truly transgressive and different to like be wearing sports attire, and like that was all. So it very well could have been a lot more tied to queerness and transness possibly, even then it's, at the end of the day, it's just a uniform. I think it's the meaning that people, you know, place in it. But I think because, like you said, clothing has become more and more, you know, kind of democratized, and there's more of a blur between what women and men wear. If we're like just looking at women and men, you know, so many women wear actual menswear now. Like that's a pretty common thing. So it's like, how much meaning can you put into a lot of this? And I think, you know, I've like seen celebrities, like out lesbian musicians like Chapel and Doechii, like, and even Billie, like wearing these like campy moments, or having on stage having these like kind of campy moments of athletic wear. And it's kind of this like, it's like this like hyper like overdone version of like sports attire. And they're like, you know, queer artists who I think are making a reference, but I think these still are spaces where a lot of like queer and trans people still like find each other in.
I think it's still a familiar visual language that can be a wink and a nod. Like
exactly.
It is still something that, even though everyone wears it, if it's like fellow queer people will be able to recognize, because there is that context and knowledge of the history of everything that you have just like talked us through. And I do think that is something, it's the context behind it that is the queerness of it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Rather than the clothing themselves. Like it's. But if I see you wearing a baseball jersey and a backwards cap, I will assume you're gay. Like, but I bet you there are like straight cis women that's just what they like to wear.
Exactly.
So it's
I think the lines are blurred.
You can't tell anything about anyone these days. Like there are Republican people who are goth. There are cowboys who are liberal. Like
But I think it's like, it's interesting, especially with like the movie Love Lies Bleeding, where it's like that becomes part of the object of desire is like these like athletic moments. Like I think that is an interesting part of like queer desire generally.
I mean, I could definitely think of equivalents of that in like with straight couples being depicted. You will still have that moment of like the oh god, what is it? The run on the beach for the red
Baywatch
swimsuits. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
You have Baywatch moments. You have the slow motion running in like athletic wear. You have like that is a trope in like straight media. So I think it makes sense that like that would also exist in queer media too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with like queer media, it's like the difference of women performing a masculinity potentially, or like but also a femininity too. But I think it just takes a different twist, as like most queer media does. Like, so with the rise of professional athletes interacting with designer brands, where do you envision athletic wear going in the future? So we have like designer collabs with sportswear companies like Nike's and Adidas, is because like athletic wear is like kind of popping up everywhere. Like it's like, I think post-pandemic athleisure is like so much bigger than it once was. So where do you think these like designer collabs, potentially like WNBA, like these like women's leagues interacting with sportswear companies and designers?
I think it's going to be I mean, there's been a lot of talk about this in the past few years. I think like Lewis Hamilton was one of the first, I don't want to say one of the first, but probably one of the most notable athletes, like actively wanting to work with designer houses. Like he is a fashion girly. He is a Louis Vuitton boy. And now, like, Louis Vuitton sponsors most of the F1 races. Like, you see massive LV banners everywhere. And then you also have, I know that like a prime time opportunity for brands now is that walk, like the tunnel walk. So for basketball players, like what they wear there is that's a big placement for a brand to get. And I have also seen like the draft for the WNBA, like the girlies were in gowns, like fully. So it's clearly, I think we're going to see a lot of athletes at the Met Gala.
Yeah.
Ooh.
They're definitely up there, I think, now, when it comes to ambassadorships. I don't know where we'll go in terms of, like, I don't think the athletes will become super involved in the design process itself. I mean, maybe they will, I don't know. But it's going to be, like, pretty obviously a cash grab when they do it. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's that's me being cynical, but we've seen like musicians try and do designer, and it hasn't exactly.
I mean, there is a whole movie with Matt Damon and Viola Davis about the Michael Jordan shoe, the Jordan shoes, and how that collaboration went down. The movie's really good.
It is.
Yeah, but there hasn't, I don't know. And again, I'm not so tapped into the sports world, but like that is one of like the most iconic collaborations of all time. And I don't know if there's anything like that. Is there?
Yeah.
Like anything else to that level? I don't know.
Because it's accessing a completely different demographic. Like it's accessing straight cis men, which is like pretty hard to engage.
And it just like swept it. Like,
yeah.
And I mean, even those like tunnel walks for like men's leagues too are like hugely popular, and I think also access straight cis men in a different way too, of like engaging more with designers and clothing and all of that. But I really think
really used to like make fun of Lewis Hamilton. Like he was the butt of the joke a lot of the times because of his outfits. But now he's like, you see so many men replicating his kind of style. They don't even realize they're doing it, but it is interesting how it kind of opens men up to experimenting with fashion in like a way that feels safer, I guess. I don't know. But I think
like
it's cool.
safer in their masculinity.
Yeah. Like, if Lewis Hamilton can dress up, then I can dress up too, you know? And I think like Travis Kelce and stuff was trying to get some brand deals.
He's
like,
a fashion guy.
He tries.
He's doing different things, which I do like appreciate. You know, he's having fun.
Yeah, and you have these men who are like the epitome of masculinity.
Big, strong, tall man. Like,
having fun with clothes, and I think that's a good thing. You know.
I'm very curious as to the technical considerations of like a designer brand collaborating. Just on my limited knowledge of performance wear, like the one class I had to take on it, it's like a whole different ball game than making regular clothes. Like it's very 100%. Scientific, the type of fabrics you use, like it goes through testing. Like, you know, like you have to get a lot out of athletic wear than more so than you would regular clothing. And you think like brands that like Nike and Adidas, like they know how to do that. That's right in their wheelhouse. Like does like a designer brand know how to do that? Like maybe.
I think that's why those collabs exist, so that like maybe the brand can dabble in activewear and like I'm sure that's probably asking a lot of a brand, because I'm sure it's also just like a cash grab to an extent.
You see a lot of brands collabing. So Asics has like done collaborations with Chipova Luena. They've done shoes, and they're like a lot of these bigger sportswear brands will sponsor people's shows. So they'll sponsor a brand show.
It's wise to keep those sportswear brands in the mix.
There definitely is a kind of symbiotic relationship between the two.
That's pretty much all of that for today, I guess. watch all of those movies that I referenced.
Every single one.
Every single one, there will be a test. I actually haven't watched all of them, if you couldn't tell. But there are some true cult classics in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think my biggest message to all of this is that I think it's beautiful having a genre of clothing that I think allows a lot of people to express gender and sexuality in different ways, and also like being community together. And I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And also at the Olympics, stop doing the sex testing.
God, stop it. God, stop it.
Fucking stop, please. It's so weird. So leave trans people alone. Yeah. We actually don't want you in our business. We never wanted you in our business.
Just want to be fast.
Let us chop our tits off and be fast. My God. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us. And
leave a comment. Comment your favorite queer athlete.
Yeah, favorite queer athlete. It's just like
your
paragraphs.
Favorite, uniform.
Uniform. Yeah. Yes.
Your favorite sports movie.
Your favorite sports movie? I know I missed probably a lot because there are truly so many. It's like kind of insane. Let us know your thoughts, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.